Well, hello, everybody. Jim Waszak here with another interesting interview. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. This is a friend of mine, Bob. Bob, thank you
Hi, Jim.
for being on today. And Bob is actually in transition. So, what I'm doing is helping him spread the word of his availability, and after you hear a few of his thoughts, if you'd like to talk to him, contact me per the rest of the information in this email. So, Bob, I understand it. You're an HR type person with a passion and expertise in employee effectiveness, correct?
That is correct.
Tell us a little bit more in your own words. How did that become a passion of yours, and sort of what your philosophy is and things like that?
Well, it probably all started with me. It started in school, in college. I have a bachelor's degree in life sciences from University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA.
Okay.
I have a master's in education from Stanford University. And shortly after, moved into the corporate world. Have stints at United Airlines, Tenneco Packaging, Kohler Company, Navistar. And through all of this, learned probably from some mistakes that companies made. And employees, I feel, don't always get the respect that they need and deserve.
Okay, that's probably true.
And when we think of human resources and human capital, we can make the best widget, but if we don't have employees making that the best way every time,
Sure.
they fall off. So I learned through the years that employee effectiveness, employee engagement is key to a healthy workforce. So it's really because of that I have focused on employee effectiveness, employee engagement, training, working with companies
Sure.
to make sure that they produce the optimal product and capitalize on their human capital.
You know, I think one of Disney's philosophies is to take exceedingly good care of your employees, so they can take exceedingly good care of your customers. So can you tell me maybe a quick snippet, a story about a success you've had, and how did you improve employee effectiveness, or what it took, and what the results were?
Well, I had an experience. I had a staff role with a rather large truck manufacturing company, and the idea was to improve on their employee effectiveness training and development programs. And through this, took an organization that offered training, but there was no structure to it.
Okay.
And
So
as
it was like a random
it was just-
accumulation of classes or something.
and
like that.
that's what it was. And oftentimes what happened is a senior executive would go to a conference or go to a meeting, seeing something really cool, and come back and say, oh, we need to implement that.
Yeah.
And it would be implemented, and in 3 months it would go away. And one of the things that employees are smart, if you're at the end of that training, it never gets to you. Because people move on and organizations move on.
Sure.
So the good news is it was setting up a corporate university. In 3 years, it became a best-in-class university. It met, and we worked very closely with senior leaders, with mid-management, to make sure that everything that was offered, one, because the company wanted it, and two, because the employees needed it and wanted it.
Super. Now, let me ask this question. Some of the companies you mentioned are mega giants. There's a lot of companies who maybe could afford to bring on a guy like you, but they don't have much budget beyond that. I mean, how would you translate some of the things you've learned into an environment where maybe there's a little less resources to work with?
Sure. I would say that what I've learned through the years is having some of the larger consulting firms are fantastic, and I've been part of one. But the amount that they charge out for somebody like me is a lot more than what they would get from me. So somebody would get my knowledge, my experience, my desire to, and my passion to make a difference at a fraction of the cost if they were to go out and get somebody else.
Sure. Okay. So in terms of a type of organization you would sort of ideally like to work for, is there an industry? Is it more a consulting firm or within a company? Give us some pointers.
Well, I have had staff roles, and I've also had consulting roles. And I would ideally want to go into where there's a best fit.
Okay.
So I could be in a staff role, I could be in a consulting role. I could be in a permanent assignment, I could be in a temporary assignment or a long-term temporary assignment. So I'm really flexible on that.
So it sounds like the key thing would be an organization that sees the benefit in making their workforce more productive.
Absolutely.
And effective.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing in my field in human capital is that you need people to be productive and effective, and it doesn't matter the industry. And I have worked in many different industries.
Yeah.
So
what if you join an organization who has maybe reached a point in their evolution, whether it's growth or competition or whatever is driving it, new ownership, who knows, but they've never really focused at all on employee development, and they have really nothing in place. So you're starting with sort of a blank slate, or maybe worse than a blank slate, because there's some residual effects from having nothing in place. How do you start? What's the first thing you would try to do? First 2-3 things.
So I would start by going to or meeting with senior management and getting their support that there's a need and it's time for the company to put a plan in place to make us better and even more effective.
Okay.
The second thing I would do is I would do a needs assessment of the organization. And you do that because not everybody needs everything. So I would meet with senior leaders, I would meet with mid-level managers, I would meet with employees at all different levels and all different functions. The third thing I would do is put together a plan based on the data that was collected, and then build a steering committee of stakeholders who want to see the change and really work with them in order to get something moving. So quickly, those are the first 3 steps. Once you get started, it's identifying milestones, it's the weekly reports, it's an effective communications plan so that employees know what's coming, how it's going to affect them. And really a change management plan. All of this is something that the organization is changing, and we want to prepare employees for change.
Can a company jump right into an employee development or training plan if they don't have other pieces in place like job description, salary structure, benefit plan?
A great question. I think that's all part of what's needed.
The assessment.
Is that assessment, and having job descriptions, having job families, knowing where people fit in an organization. I think all ties into that, and I really think helps with performance management, with talent management, and even succession planning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably one of the biggest things I don't see here, particularly that mid-level company. When somebody leaves, there's usually a gigantic hole.
Okay,
Because they haven't,
a plan.
yeah, they haven't set a plan in place.
Yeah. Okay. Bob, I think last question, and then we'll conclude. So if people hired you either as a full-time employee or as a consultant, which I understand you're open to, they're probably thinking, wow, it's going to cost me a lot of money. Can you give some idea what kind of return do they get on that money over what period of time? I would think that you more or less would pay for yourself and efficiency gains and protecting the company from frivolous lawsuits and problems like that. But what would be your estimate?
Oh boy.
Did I ask another good question?
Yeah, that was that very that question. That boy, I think that the gain is exactly what you say. So I'll address an issue that I have just been actually called into, and in today's environment, how we can have senior executives and mid-level managers with sexual harassment is terrible, and we shouldn't be having that. And then what it costs to train employees, to train managers, the legal costs and everything else, doing a little bit of homework up front saves this company millions of dollars and would pay for me 100 times over.
Okay.
So I think it's that way in implementing a new change to the organization, whether it's technology or a process. The amount of money that companies spend doing rework doesn't have to take place.
Right.
So having a team on board or a consultant coming in and getting all of that so that there aren't those issues, I think pays for somebody like me.
Right. So you actually, I guess the thought that comes to my mind is that it's sort of like a football team where you have the offensive strategy where you're putting in training programs, you're getting employees working better, maybe you're improving the culture or morale, but then you also have the defensive strategy where you want to eliminate the risk factors that are unfortunately all too prevalent and seem to be growing in our culture.
Right, and the benefit you have with somebody like me is you don't get a best position player. You get a best all-round athlete that can play offense, defense, and special teams.
Okay, super. Well, thank you, Bob. I met Bob through my volunteer work at the Community Career Center. He struck me as a very professional, a very sharp individual. He's very personable. And if you are looking for a person to add to your team, either on a full-time or a contract basis, who can really make a difference with your employees, let me know and I'll be happy to introduce you. Thank you very much. Until next time.
Thank you.